Congress returns in session this Monday, but negotiations are still at a standstill to get the Department of Homeland Security back up and running after funding the department lapsed last Saturday. The GOP says Democrats are using this partial shutdown to stall a Senate vote on the Save America Act, the legislation which would require proof of citizenship to vote. President Trump doubled down on his push for voter ID during a speech in Georgia yesterday. Watch.
We want voter ID. We want proof of citizenship. For you to vote, let's prove that you're an American. So please, proof of citizenship. They're fighting that. Republicans have to win this one. We'll never lose a race. For 50 years, we won't lose a race. We want voter ID. We want proof of citizenship. And we don't want mail-in ballots except for the military far away, except for people that are ill, disabled, or people that are away. Even for a vacation, we'll be generous, okay?
Very practical ideas there. The president also wrote on Truth Social, quote, "We are going to have the Save America Act one way or the other after approval by Congress through the very proper use of the filibuster or, at a minimum, by a talking filibuster." The legislation has backing from 50 Senate Republicans. Add on J.D. Vance, you've got 51. That's enough to clear at least one procedural hurdle, but not enough to overcome a filibuster, which requires 60 votes, of course, without Democrat support. Joining me now is Florida Congresswoman Paulina Luna. Congresswoman, good to see you. Thanks so much for being here. And you want the SAVE Act tied to the reauthorization of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA, right?
I think that that's probably going to be the avenue of approach here. What's so crazy, Maria, is that at any time Senator Thune can embrace the talking filibuster, but I'm also hearing that within his chamber and his thin majority that there are senators not supporting it. So that is definitely a realistic approach in the event that they choose to not do the right thing, which is embrace the talking filibuster.
So, I mean, the talking filibuster, walk us through that. How would that play out? In other words, you're having an opportunity for Democrats to actually make the case. Why would you oppose having proof of citizenship?
Well, what it does is it basically will force them to allocate a certain amount of floor debate time, which they only have a set amount every year. In my opinion, they should probably change that, too, because Senate and really the House of Representatives has one job. That's to debate and to vote. And if they don't want to do that, we're in big trouble. But exactly to your point, it basically forces the Senate to debate to the point of exhaustion, and then they can't obstruct any ability to prevent the vote from coming to the floor. And then at that point in time, they would actually be able to vote on it. You know, this is traditionally how the Senate was supposed to function, and then a couple of decades ago, it somehow changed. But as Senator Mike Lee has stated, again, going back to what Senate was supposed to be and how it was supposed to function, I think people all learn bad habits, but they need to course correct. And I would actually push back on Senator Thune and say that the Save America Act, voter ID, is one of the top issues in this country. So they need to move heaven and earth to allocate time in order to bring forward that debate. But in the event that they don't, the president does have the option of really asking the House of Representatives and the Speaker to attach the Save America Act to FISA, and that's a must-pass reauthorization. And in my opinion, that would force them to pass it.
Well, I mean, we know that this is one of the top issues because we know that more than 80% of Americans believe that we should have a proper ID to vote. What's your take on what your colleague, Jared Moskowitz, said to me this week? He's saying, oh, yes, I will agree to it as long as it's just a driver's license. I made the point, no, well, the driver's license process has been abused. Here's a bit of that with your colleague from Florida just this week. Watch. Are you going to vote yes for ID to vote?
I'm for photo ID. We have photo ID here in Florida. And so I have no problem with photo ID. What's being proposed is a separate, completely different identification just for voting.
Now, wait a minute, because the SAVE Act, the Save America Act, is requiring voters to show ID to vote. And they also require a citizenship so that you stay with the law and, in fact, only have American citizens voting. So, again, will you vote yes to that act?
Yes, so again, there's no evidence that non-citizens are voting.
American citizens vote in American elections. So having an ID to vote would be in step with the law. So are you going to vote for the law?
If they put forward a bill that says you can use your driver's license or your state-issued identification to vote, I support that. The SAVE Act goes way beyond that. It would affect women whose birth certificate doesn't match their driver's license. It will depress turnout by requiring people to go and re-register to go get this new voter ID.
Congressman. That's not true.
This is about depressing turnout. It's not about making sure non-citizens vote. Let them use their driver's license.
Either, Maria. Congressman. The SAVE Act is a requirement for ID to vote, period. Congresswoman, what do you want to say to that?
Look, everything that he's stating is not accurate in regards to, A, wanting to depress voter turnout, and then also that it would make it more difficult for women to be able to vote. This seems to be a very common talking point for the Democrat Party currently. And I think what they're trying to do is really rally their base against this, even though their own base supports. Many Democrats support voter ID. And so what they're trying to do is fearmonger people into thinking that Republicans are literally, they're saying that Republicans are going to steal the election. And so what I always say to that is, if you really believe what the Blue Anons are saying, wouldn't you want to secure it by having voter ID? So I think that the president might address this during his State of the Union address. But again, the way to secure elections, to ensure that all Americans, regardless of party affiliation, believe and feel that their vote counts, is to have voter ID. And so I've been championing that. As you know, Maria, I was willing and ready to shut down the government. But the president did say that he would help us with this. And as you're seeing, he's doing just that.
Yeah. So what else are you expecting from the president for the State of the Union on Tuesday night?
I think that he's really going to help set the messaging leading into the midterms. I'm feeling that he might talk about, the filibuster, the Save America Act, obviously what he's been doing with capping prescription prices, and then also to banning insider trading. When we first came on the show a couple months ago and talked about this being a massive issue within Congress and wanting to read out the government corruption that currently exists, insider trading is, again, one of these issues that is largely supported by the American people. And I think for so many years, the president has been taking incoming from the media, and they really try to spin everything that he does. But it's going to be interesting to see them try to tell the American people why banning insider trading is terrible, because President Trump is pushing it. Yeah. And I think that you'll find that his speech now, especially because, we are going into the midterms, will activate the base, but also will have follow through and wins for the American people. And so I'm looking forward to it. Very happy about what he's doing with his economic populism. And I think another thing to remember is that capping prescription pricing, something that he pushed with the favored nations billing and pricing for it. I think that that's incredibly important. People forget that. But again, this is about codifying what he's done to ensure that it can't be undone in the next administration.
Well, it's a great point, and your colleague Brian Stile has been on the program talking about that. I mean, I was really struck when he said there's a lot of trading going on in Congress, which of course is highly inappropriate. Congressman, the president is also giving Iran a new deadline to make a nuclear deal or face consequences. Here's the president yesterday. Watch this.
What is the goal if there is a U.S. military strike?
Well, we're going to make a deal, or we're going to get a deal one way or the other.
But with a military strike, is it to wipe out their nuclear program?
I'm not going to talk to you about that, but we're either going to get a deal or it's going to be unfortunate for them.
And you said today 10 days. Have you given them a deadline firm to make a deal?
I would think that would be enough time, 10, 15 days, pretty much maximum.
The U.S. on the global stage right now, Congresswoman, the president apparently or reportedly weighing a limited military strike to pressure Iran to make concessions. The Journal is reporting, quote, the opening assault, which is, if authorized, could come within days, would target a few military or government sites. People familiar with the matter told the Journal. If Iran still refused to comply with Trump's directive to end its nuclear enrichment, the U.S. would respond with a broad campaign against regime facilities, potentially aimed at toppling the regime. Meanwhile, Russia is urging restraint from Iran, it claims, but it says it will keep up its relations with Tehran. How do you see all of this in the middle of the president's Board of Peace meeting yesterday, the inaugural meeting?
Look, President Trump has taken a very different approach on foreign policies than any other leaders, and it's worked out best for the American people in pursuing peace over intervention. However, I want to remind the American people, the president has not been wrong on Iran. I know that before a lot of people were fear-mongering, saying that this would lead us into World War III. And I also want to remind the American people that Iran on multiple occasions, not just publicly said that they are going to try to assassinate the president, but there were massive security issues with them taking action. And so I think that the president will get what he wants. I think that they know that he's not playing games, but I also understand his foreign policy and the strategy behind it. So I'm backing him with whatever he decides to do, but I would like to see his efforts play out and work out on behalf of the American people and see those peace deals come through with those negotiations.
All right, Congresswoman, we'll be watching all of that. Great to speak with you. Thanks so much for being here. Anna Paulina Luna in Florida.
Thank you.
We'll see you soon.